The sun has left and
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. The stories we tell have a big influence in how people perceive us. When you listen to somebody's story, you can hear a lot about who they are and what matters to them. So today's guest is a friend of mine, Carlos Joaquin, here in Helena, and we're sitting in the Sidecar co-working space, listening to other people visiting, loving the sounds of a busy co-working space with coffee and beer and even kombucha. And this isn't actually where I met Carlos, but that's a story for another time. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, when I heard that you are embarking on a new part of your career, a new era, I had to get in here and hear more about what you want to be doing based on what you've done and what you found really a lot of success in. Particularly your recent position for the last year of bringing learning and development to a large company on a contract as they were growing. So before we get into that, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all of my guests. Tell me something about yourself that most people don't know about you. And I'm asking that because we have a tendency these days, I think more now than ever, to anchor a person in time based on one interaction we have with them. So especially if we see them only on social media, we only see one tiny portion of who they are, but we often just decide who they are based on those interactions. And I think that really limits potential for community. It limits potential for connection, and it definitely limits potential for developing people. So what do you know that you could share with us that most people around here wouldn't know?
Oh my gosh. I could go one of two ways.
We can go both.
Okay. So the first one is, and they're kind of tied together, but the first one is that I was in this like cult thing for about 10 years.
Oh,
And then the other one, so you decided which one to keep. The other one is that I've traveled to tons of countries. So Italy, Spain, France, Israel, and most of this again when I was super young. But yeah, it's just I think most people won't know that about me. And then a third option for you is that I'm an illustrator, or I wanted to be an animator growing up.
oh, okay. Well, I think we can touch on all three as different points in our conversation. So the cult, how old were you?
I was 15 when I
15 to
joined.
25.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, what drew you into it? What was the story? What happened at 15 that made you susceptible to that?
Well, I think what I was, 15, teenager, my dad worked a lot, so he was always um, not at home. So he was working in the evenings, and I always had these questions, about life, about faith, even
Purpose.
purpose.
Right. Why are we even here?
Right. And I was just very open, very inquisitive. And my mom had a friend through church, but it was like this separate church group. Like it wasn't at church, it was church adjacent.
Okay.
And so then
Where they found their recruits.
where they found their recruits.
Uh-huh.
And so I grew up in this Hispanic community in Orange County, California, Santa Ana. And, grew up Catholic. There's a big devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so that's the day they would like recruit and then bring them into this church adjacent cult.
So you associate it mostly with your inquisitiveness and the fact that your dad wasn't there to set the guardrails.
Yes.
And were they married?
Yeah. My
Okay.
parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And was your mom part of the cult?
She was. Yeah.
Oh, so that's how, wow. So, when did you, what was something that happened during that time, maybe when you were 23, 24, 25, when you started to see that this wasn't what you thought it was going to be? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, what happened? There must have been something specific that happened.
Yeah. So the thing that happened was I met my wife there
Mhm.
and we got married, and we were seeing things happening that we were like, wait, what's happening? Why are
Like what?
these like, so, like with most cults, they hide a lot of things. There's these steps.
Right.
And so they say to get to this part, you need to go through this thing. And so they were always hiding things, and my inquisitive mind always was asking things. And one of the things they used to say a lot is like obedience over everything. Obedience. Always obey, always obey.
I hear that word. It makes me vomit a little in my mouth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my wife, who never liked being part of this, she got introduced when she was 12 years old
Oh my gosh.
to it, and her parents were very involved with it. But she was always resistant to that. So she was more aware than I was.
Mhm.
I'm a very gullible, like happy-go-lucky guy.
I wouldn't call you gullible. I would say that your curiosity isn't just about things and how things work, but your curiosity is genuinely, I want to learn more about people.
Yeah, and I want to explore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this obedience thing was a big main staple of them. And our priest parishioner was like, hey, we're not going to have your group be associated with our parish anymore. We need to have you come to church in the church. That's the way we're going to do it. And they didn't obey. So they shifted to another parish, another church. And in my head, that was like a disconnect. Because I was like, wait, I thought you were under obedience. I thought we were under this parish. And now because he's instituting rules,
You don't want to follow them.
now you don't want to follow them. So it was like a hypocrisy.
Right.
And that really started shedding things away. And we were discussing this, and my wife's like, what if we just stop going? And I'm like, yeah, what if we do that? But, in a cult,
Right.
they separate you from all your friends, all the rest of your family that's not part of it.
Right.
And so we knew that we were going to be ostracized, and we knew that everybody that we knew was in that
Right.
space.
Ooh, that's a hard.
So it was going to be a
Right.
hard decision.
Right.
And then I don't know if my dad was in it yet, but her parents were very much in it. My mom was in it. And so we knew that it was going to cause a rift.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the big decision maker. But yeah, we decided to just say, you know what, we're not going to be part of this anymore. And we're going to say goodbye. And we did. And it was hard, but I don't know. I think we found strength in each other and just, if we were united, because usually what would happen is if there was a couple and one wanted to leave, the other one stayed, and it was just a big,
really ugly. I've heard stories about that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and then we knew, or my wife knew better than I did, that if we left, that they were going to be trying to convince you, trying to
right.
I don't know, pressure you to stay.
And create a wedge between you and your spouse. Right,
exactly. And that's what they tried to do, actually. They surprised us one day. They just showed up at our home, the leaders of our group. And and they're like, which one of you is the one that started this? And we're like, no, we're together. We're united. And they're like, well, why do you want to leave? And I'm like, because, we don't like certain things that are happening. We can't ask questions, and I think what's best for us is to separate, to leave, for our own growth. And they're like, no, one of you decided this. Who is it? And they were trying to
manipulate.
Yes. And we were like, no, we're united. We're going to be together.
You can leave our house now.
Yeah.
Get out.
Leave. Exactly.
Oof. Wow. Okay. So how did you end up traveling the world? Was that after that?
No, it was part of it, because it's still loosely tied to the Catholic Church. right?
Okay.
And we're still Catholic. Like
Okay.
me and my wife are Catholic, but this,
But not the sect.
yes, not this sect,
Yeah.
not this
So did you go
cultish
on
thing.
missionary tours or something? Is that how you traveled?
No, but there's a lot of missionary stuff in there. It was World Youth Day
Oh.
is what got us to travel.
Oh, so you went to different countries to celebrate that.
Yeah. So the Pope would call all the youth of the world, the Catholic world, and we'd go and we really thought we were like just even better than the Catholic Church, like we were just the super awesome
We're the super
Catholics.
Catholics.
Yes. And oh my gosh, we were just so wrong.
Well, that whole comparison thing, it kind of is totally anti-Christian, right?
Oh yeah.
When you think about what Christianity is, what I understand it to be as a Jewish woman who has, lived in predominantly Christian areas my whole life. Wow. Wow. Okay. So now you traveled the world, and I'm guessing that part of that helped you start to wonder about your experience with this offshoot of the church.
Yes.
You and your wife are like, well, we just saw the world and it's nothing like what you're describing.
Right.
Because that's usually what happens when people decide to change something dramatically in their lives. As they travel, they're exposed to a really different experience. Was there one travel experience that was especially enlightening that you wouldn't think of it at the time, but you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that probably...
I don't think there was a particular thing. I think like looking back now, those trips were expensive.
Right.
So we paid a lot of money. It was this big collective. I don't know, maybe 50 people would go to these things. And they're collecting 3,000, 4,000 bucks from each of us. But we wouldn't even really sleep in hotels. We'd be sleeping in the streets. Like, okay, well, where's the money going? Like now looking back.
You slept in the streets?
Yeah, so we'd sleep in the street. We'd sleep like in a forest or a campground. And they'd say, oh, tonight there's not a lodging place for us. And there'd always be like a reason, to...
Holy shit, Carlos. Well, okay. I'm imagining all this. I'm like right there with you, partly because when my family went to Rome when our boys were little, we were in Tuscany. We explored with my husband's family for about a week, and then we went off by ourselves for a second week and went down to Rome, and we went into the train station late at night, the first night we were in Rome, and came up out of the train at the Colosseum at like 11 o'clock at night. It's pitch dark except for the full moon dangling over the Colosseum. It was the most magical experience. I mean, I've had a lot of magical experiences, but that is like so vivid in my mind. Well, after we explored there for a little while, it was time to go back to the hotel, and we got on the train and got back, but we went out the wrong part of the train station. And this is one of the biggest train stations in the world. And we went out the wrong side of it. So we're walking and walking and walking. We're on the back side of the Termini train station. And there are all these vents coming up from the subway system. So it's shooting up warm air that's not healthy to breathe. It's exhaust, right? And all of the hundreds of homeless people are camped out on these grates. And my younger son was 8. And he came up next to me, really uncomfortable. And he's super independent and would normally walk ahead of us. And he was always very suspicious. So he'd hold on to his fanny pack that had his camera in it. It was about all that I would let him carry. But he was very careful about where he was. But suddenly he comes up next to me and puts his hand in mine. A big signal that something's not quite right. And I said, what's going on next? He goes, why are all these people here? And I said, what do you mean? He said, why are they sleeping here? And I said, because they don't have anywhere else to go. And he said, all of them? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, why are they here? I said, well, look at when we walk over these grates, what do we feel? And he said, it's warm. And I said, yeah, it's warm air. And he said, so they're sleeping on it because it's warm. I said, yeah. He said, but it's pollution. They shouldn't be breathing it. And I said, well, they'd rather breathe the pollution than to be cold. And he got so serious and there were hundreds. And he grew up his whole life in Montana. And we have traveled to Washington, D.C., to Denver, Colorado, to Portland, to Oregon, to San Francisco. He has seen homeless encampments and homeless people, but not at that scale.
Mm-hmm.
So his experience, he immediately looked at me and said, "What can we do?"
Mm.
And I said, "What do you mean? How can we help them?" I said, "Help all of them?" He got really quiet. And from that point, he always had a different perspective about the people he experienced, no matter where he was. So I'm imagining you sleeping on the street, and as much as it's like absurd that you collected all this money to go to Europe or wherever you were going and not have a hostel to stay in or a school with cots to be sleeping on the street, as absurd as it is, it had to have made an impact on how you think about the world.
Yeah, I would say so, I think. Just enduring things and then not understanding why, right? Because you're young, you're a teenager, and it seems like an adventure, but looking back, you're like, what the heck? Where did all that money go? And, sometimes in this cult, they would like have a retreat that was not mandatory, but was mandatory.
Right.
And then they'd lock up the doors and they'd say, hey, we still owe X amount of money. So you got to pay this money and
Before you can get out.
before you leave. And, you guys are just lovers of money. And, you got to throw away this money because it's Satan's candy, and sometimes we'd be like, we can't go. We don't have money right now. They're like, no, come. It's, God will provide. But then you get this hammering and you'd be like, oh my gosh, can I like put something on my credit card? Like I just need to leave. Like I need to get out of here.
So I'm still like I'm still thinking about how this happened, and you're falling into it probably because your mom fell into it.
Mm-hmm.
And other members of the church that you admired. And I guess what I'm experiencing right now is who I know you to be now.
Yeah.
And the potential would be for us to lose your kindness, that edge of naivete that is actually just love.
Yeah.
And you didn't. And I would like to, I would see that your partner, your wife, is a big influence in that way. And at the same time, I'm thinking about the work that you've been doing for the last year and what you want to be doing in the future. So when you think about that experience and how you approach learning, how you approach the development of employees.
Yeah.
What do you think is a holdover from that experience? Whether it's what you experienced in the early stages of the love that drew you in, or the skepticism that brought you out.
Mm-mm.
What do you think is the impact here?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is an experience. I always try to find, 3 silver linings from any experience, whether it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one I find from this cult thing that I was in is I found my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
I found her there and I'm like, if I wouldn't have gone through this hell, I wouldn't have met her. And you're right. She's a big part of my journey and my story and everything that I've been able to do now. And then the second one is I got to travel and see all these places that I don't think I would have ever even imagined going to. Like I grew up pretty poor, like just inner city kid that just didn't even know that this world existed outside of this city. And then the third thing is just resilience and understanding of there's badness out there, but you could separate yourself out. Sometimes the best thing is to leave a bad situation and find a way out. sometimes that's the best thing
Right.
to do.
When you know you can't change it, you
When you
have
know
to.
you can't change it, because
Right.
why try to change that in that whole, they still
Yeah.
have a leader, they still believe in it, right? And
Right.
we're not going to be able to change their minds. They're
Right.
so into it.
Right. So here's where I see your magic when it comes to the learning development of employees as a consultant, as an HR consultant, or within an organization.
Mhm.
Where I see this coming together is um, your approach is really being very open and curious, creating an environment where people feel safe to ask questions.
Yes.
And that is a result of your experience of not being safe to ask.
Yes. Look at you. I love that. I love how you tie that in, because it's true. Psychological safety is a key factor of any learning and development. And if you can't have that, then there's always this lingering or this resistance or this inability to even share or to connect. And so I don't know if you've ever read Culture Code, the book
I haven't
Culture
read
Code,
that one yet.
but he says that that's one of the main elements of creating a good culture, is creating that psychological safety to be able to express something and not be shot down, right? Whereas in this, experience,
Right.
you would ask something and they'd be like, no, like,
Well, a
obey.
lot of rigid religions are like that.
Yes.
That was one of the things that I don't consider myself a particularly religious Jew. But one of the things I've always found a lot of value in is the fact that we are encouraged, we're required to ask questions and not to follow blindly.
Yes.
And the joke is, if you ask a dozen rabbis to interpret some part of the Old Testament, you'll get 14 different opinions.
Right.
And that's because we're encouraged to ask questions and have conversations and discuss. And so when I think about the environment that you create, I'd love to hear about an experience recently, like in the last year, where you were doing some sort of training or some program, and you saw either in the moment or later a big impact.
Yeah. And actually, can I step back really quick and
Yes.
talk about, as I was going through this, I got a job at Apple in California.
Oh, see, that's another thing that maybe a lot of people don't know about you.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm assuming people know my whole life story and they follow me on everything. But yeah, no, 2001, I got this job at Apple. And I think we left that group in like 2005.
Oh,
So in these 4 years, I think Apple played a big role in like encouragement and asking questions, and just the way they onboard people, where they're really people focused and they're just, encouraging you and developing you. And the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you expand your horizon. So I think there's a correlation there. But one of my most favorite leaders at Apple, she always had this ability to connect with you and to listen to you. And that's what we learned, in delivering an experience. It's, you got to listen, you got to connect, and then you, if possible, you recommend something, whether it's a $5 cable or $5,000 computer setup. It's all about that experience, making sure you're tailoring something to that client. And I got to do a ton of roles there. And it was all because of this leader, because she was very encouraging of me. And she said, she was my manager first, but she later became market leader. And so each Apple store in Orange County has about, I don't know, between 100 to 200 employees. So it's a big, and she would come in and she'd connect with you and she'd remember like the last story that you had or your family members. She always talked about my wife, and like it was just this, I don't know, this incredible skill to just remember each person and connect with them.
care about them.
Care.
Right.
And that's what Apple was about, and the caring and the encouragement. And so I've always tried to bring that forward And so I remember I had this opportunity to be a leader here in Helena for an organization. And I found out through this connection of one of my employees that he loved D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Mhm.
And he loved this core group of friends. And he was a little sad because he was working Friday nights and that's when they met. So I went and I changed the schedule. I'm like, okay, let's give him Friday nights. He loves it. Let him enjoy it.
Right.
Right. And he became one of our top salespersons. Right. Just
It's
he was
so easy.
Yeah.
If only they knew it was that easy.
Because you focus on that person and you find out what do they care about? How can I help them get a little bit of that into their lives? Right. Because it's more than numbers. It's more than metrics. It's caring about this person, and this person will deliver those numbers. They'll deliver those metrics.
Direct correlation.
Direct correlation. And so then, I was going to be with this organization and thinking about going to another location. So there's a new leader that stepped in. What do you think the first thing they did was?
Put him back on Friday nights.
Put him back on Friday nights because Friday is our busiest day. And that's when the most sales happen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you not understand how much he cares about this? Well, he wasn't there. He wasn't there for much longer.
Yeah,
I
he
think
left.
2 months.
Your top salesman left.
Yes.
And you really want your top salesperson on the slower days, right? I mean, that's what I would want because that's, you get more out of that. Anyone can sell on a busy day.
Right.
Oh, it's so short-sighted.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. One more. So I love this, tell me what you do without telling me what you do. So one of the things that I like to talk about are things that happen with my own clients. I'll when somebody says, what do you do? I don't say, well, I'm a workplace communication trainer using Gallup Strengths Finder. Like, who cares, right? I'll say, well, I got a text message from one of my clients the other day, and it said that she had had an 8-minute conversation with her 15-year-old son. And anyone who has interacted with a 15-year-old boy knows that they don't speak in full sentences to their mother, certainly not for 8 minutes. But this text message had smiley face and emojis because we had had a conversation the week before where she was having a little bit of friction with one of her employees, and she just couldn't understand why he didn't understand what she was trying to get him to do. And I said, well, here are his strengths, and here's the language that might be more inspiring for him. But in the meantime, these talents, your responsibility and achiever, can come across kind of abrupt, and they can come across kind of judgy sometimes. Have you experienced that before? And you should, like her face just dropped. She's like, yeah. And I said, these are your talents. They're beautiful when they're being used in a way that is useful, right? It's not productive to be judgy with an employee because nobody is ever going to do the right thing or do the best that they can if they feel like they're being judged.
Right.
They don't trust that you have their back. So, and she got very quiet on the call, and I said, what's going on? I can see your wheels turning. And she said, well, it's not work related. I said, that's okay. Share. Tell me. And she said, well, I'm realizing that this might be the same thing that's happening with my kid, where maybe he's feeling judged. And you're right. Nobody ever benefits or will connect and be a good leader if they're judging the people. If their people are feeling judged, you're never going to be a good leader. So that's a story I'll tell because it demonstrates, first of all, what I do, and it also demonstrates how good I am at it. So when you think about a recent experience, obviously you have that perfect experience that you shared before. I want to hear one more, especially related to what you want to do next, which with whatever organization gets the benefit and joy of working with you.
You're too kind. Okay, so recent experience is, one of the employees I'm mentoring. I told the team, hey, I love transparency, right? So I told the team, hey, my role is getting phased out. I probably have a month or 2 with you. And what surprised me was that one of them in particular just started crying.
Oh,
And I was like, oh my gosh, like
that's impact.
that's impact. And then, I later asked her, like, I know you took it a little hard, and thank you for caring for me. And, what do you think is one of the things you've learned in my time here? And she said, you know what? One of the things I've really learned is confidence. Like, to speak up during the meeting. And she's the quiet kind. She's the very thoughtful, like, procedures, like everything. She's very crossing the T's and dotting the I's, right?
Right.
But this confidence in her speaking up, I was just so happy to hear that from her, because you don't know that you impact someone like that. But I remember somebody impacting me with confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and to see that come around and see somebody else take that, it's just very rewarding, I
That
would
is
say.
the biggest gift on both sides, right? For her, your gift to her of helping her gain confidence and be comfortable in her skin, and then her telling you that you had that impact. Oh my gosh, that's a perfect example. Because it comes back to creating that environment of trust where people can ask questions, but it's also an environment of care where they know that you want them to develop. You want them to succeed, even if it means going to another team or moving up into a different position away from you. You want that for them if that's what they want for themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like leadership, and I think Simon Sinek says this, it's about caring for the people in your charge, right? And you're right. I've always had mentors that either I would listen to or read about, and they would always talk about, yeah, the role of a leader is to develop someone so that they could either get a promotion, so that they could grow if they want to, right?
And where and how.
Right.
Right.
And even if that means for them to go to another organization, then that's okay. And so, again, tying it back to this cult thing where they didn't want you to grow,
Right.
they didn't want you to question, they just wanted you to stay in the same spot so that they could control you in a way, and hammer you for the obedience and the money.
Exactly. Well, and you see that in organizations where they basically have indentured servants, and
Yes, and
they don't want the
every bit.
creativity, and then they are surprised when people leave, and they're surprised when, even worse, the whole quiet quitting thing.
Yeah.
In Gallup's language, it would be the actively disengaged.
Yes.
So, and the thing is, if you have even half of your team that's disengaged, which means they're just doing the minimum required to get by, and then the actively disengaged is another half of that or a third of that, you're talking about people who are looking for work while they're at work.
Yeah.
These are the people who might even sabotage projects,
Right.
unintentionally or intentionally. And it's not hard to change that dynamic. And you are the prime example of how people can do that.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you. We need leaders like you around. And listeners, Carlos is looking for his next project.
Yes, I'm looking for an opportunity, either in leadership, L&D, learning and development, or community building, which is another thing that, I don't know, I guess tying it back to the original question, it's like, I do love connection. I do love, conversations. I do love asking questions. And so, I lead about 6 different sessions around town monthly, the learning lounge. I lead a bullet journal club session. And I just want people to have conversations, to ask questions, and maybe grow and help each other grow.
I'm going to bring that back one more time to the cult, because when you were 15, that's what you were looking for.
Yes.
And that's at some level what that cult was providing you.
Yeah. In a limited fashion, but I knew exactly what I didn't want. And so it was it was like a good example of don't do this. Don't hold people captive.
Right.
Don't force them into obedience.
But at
Let
the
them
time,
explore.
when you were 15, what you wanted was something predictable. You wanted a community that was going to like you, and you knew exactly what you had to do that.
Right.
You knew exactly what was expected of you to earn this community of people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you got out that you realized that you could build your own community on your own terms.
Absolutely.
I love it. Carlos, this has been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Listeners, it's your turn. What is something that happened in your life, early in your life, that you can now attach to your values? That you can look back, and maybe at the time you didn't see it, but you can look back now and see it as a pivotal moment that made you who you are right now. And how can you reframe the story so that, like Carlos does, you find those silver lining moments that you understand intuitively, innately, that you can do better. Thanks for listening.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.